Hey, Tonya Singer, welcome to the Boosting Achievement podcast. How are you?
Fabulous. Good
I'm,
morning.
Good
Talk with you.
morning. It's so wonderful to talk to you. We've been behind the scenes having tech issues, but we're going to persevere. I'm so glad to be doing this take two with you. And you know what? I had mentioned before, I'm very excited that we got a chance to meet at WIDA, but it was so brief. And so I'm excited to be able to talk to you for a longer bit of time and to make sure that everybody who listens to this show gets to know about you and your work. And so I'd be honored if you would tell us about yourself. And you're super passionate. So tell us about what you're doing and how you help educators right now.
So I work all over the world, actually, helping educators, but primarily in North America, in the United States and Canada, helping educators be effective with English language learners. And honestly, to be effective with every student who may be struggling, may not currently be performing at the level. So I do keynotes, I do multi-day institutes and online coaching. And my passion is really about me making sure every kid has access and opportunity. And that includes not just doing well on tests, but really having voice, choice, agency, and excellence.
And speaking of excellence, we recently read your book as a big group in ELL Chat Book Club. So, can you talk to us about that book? That's not your first book, but it was my first exposure to you, and I love it. I love the positivity and how it's trying to help us reframe how we think. Can you talk to us about ELL excellence every day?
Absolutely. This is a flip to guide to differentiating academic literacy. And I work with teachers. I'm also married to a teacher. I also have kids who are in school. So I know that teachers are busy. They have a very, very hard job and need a book that's really gives you what you need at your fingertips. And some of the stuff that's quick and go to, it just doesn't have the depth of the pedagogy that I'd like to see. So this really, my goal with this book, and I'm excited, I feel like it's there, is to help give really expert pedagogy in an easy to use flip to format.
And I think it was very obvious if you look at the hashtag, there's a hashtag for your book, EL Excellence. It's just EL Excellence, right?
Yes.
Hashtag EL Excellence. So if people search that hashtag on social media, we did the book study on Twitter with the ELL Chat Book Club group. But if you look at that hashtag specifically, you're going to see that a lot of people found it very practical and very positive and just a great guide for pedagogy, period, not just for English learners, which we know is, at the heart of sheltered instruction. But your message really, every time we interact on Twitter, I feel that you're beating a drum of assets, positive, not just how do you help close a gap. Where does that passion come from? How did you develop that mindset yourself?
Well, from a young age, I would be honest, I've been troubled by the inequities of our country, the disconnect. I noticed, skin tones changed across the freeway, and people are using Spanish, but not everyone. And there was sort of a deficit tone, I would say, to even just saying Mexican or saying Spanish, where I live in California. And that really was not in sync at all with my values or the values of people around me. So I didn't understand it. So being very curious about where does this come from and what is it? I don't believe it's right. I went to Mexico by myself when I was 19 in the summer. And I had an amazing experience too, where family welcomed me into my home, into their home.
And you did something really special with your book and that family. Talk to us about that, because I just almost jumped out of my chair when I read how you dedicate to us.
I didn't speak a lot of Spanish at the time. I studied Spanish in high school, and I learned how to conjugate verbs and all that stuff. It's really not the best way to learn a language. But I needed help with the fluency and the talking and all that. So I was speaking mostly in the present tense, and I lived with the family and basically just helped with the grocery shopping and the cooking and everything. And here I am writing this book, writing the dedication to the book, I don't know how many years later, 20, 25 years later. And I was thinking, who do I want to dedicate this book to? And there are many educators who've influenced me, many, many. And of course, there's my children who I dedicated my first book to. But as soon as it hit me that I wanted to dedicate it to Juana and Alberto Ballesteros Cruz in Mexico City, I just started crying. I just realized that an experience 25 years ago had a profound impact on my life, more so than I'd even thought about. So I wrote the dedication. In that moment, I decided I'm not going to message them on Facebook and tell them what I did. I'm going to wait till the book comes out, and I'm going to go to Mexico City and give it to them in person.
Oh my God.
So if you go to my Twitter, which is at Tonya Singer, it's my pinned tweet. I pinned a video, which is really, I made it 2 minutes because we're all busy. A little 2-minute video of the moment where I showed him the dedication, because I just started crying before I even started talking, but it was really precious to get to see them again and thank them.
Yeah.
You know, the opportunity to thank people for influencing you, and to be in Mexico and to be with people in Mexico who are very proud to be Mexican and don't want to leave Mexico, and are very established and happy in their culture. And really, Mexico is full of that. I mean, the depth of culture and art and history and everything that we don't necessarily learn in our education here. It's amazing to go. I was just in Mexico City with my kids. So
yeah, we need more of that. We need more of this, because you know how the media is, and it's horrible things that are happening, and we see all the negativity. So I think that's why your video and what you did struck me, and will strike so many teachers that help language learners, because we all feel that way, and we want to see the beautiful things as well. And not everybody is hating on everybody. You know, it's very, we want to make sure that people see these beautiful things where we reach across the border and thank people for how we influence each other. So thank you for sharing that. I thought it was such a neat way to get started reading your book, was to see who you dedicated it to and how you dedicated it to them. Was just precious and fantastic. So thank you for that. Tell us, you also have a part, well, I read actually on your website about your experience as a young learner. And there was a teacher that you talked about. I don't remember if it's in the About You or it's in some part of your site, where you really learned, you weren't real confident at that time, and she did some things with mistakes that just made me chuckle out loud, but also very heartwarming. And I think it hits it, you know, is that when you decided to be a teacher? And can you tell a little bit about that?
I wouldn't say that's when I decided to be a teacher. That was much later, but for me, I was afraid of my voice. I grew up a little timid. My parents divorced when I was young, and I internalized this idea that, which kids do, which is wrong. It's not right, but like, I did something wrong, and you know, I need to please everybody or they're going to leave me. I mean, that's sort of my like interpretation of the world as a young child. And so expressing my own voice, you know, like my own story, making mistakes publicly, none of those things, I was not going to go there. Right. I mean, it's still scary because I'm human, and that's the nature of being human. But as a kid, it was amazing when I was with Marion and she sat me down and she wanted me to tell a story. And I don't know how to tell a story. And she said, well, just, what do you see in this picture? And she cut out pictures of lions, and I talked about the lions. And as I spoke, she wrote down everything I said. And then she made a mistake. It was in ink, and she goes, oops. And she drew a picture out of the mistake and just laughed about it. And for me, I hadn't seen that modeled in my life. And to see that lightness with the mistakes, and that mistakes are magic, was powerful for me as a learner, very important for me as a writer and an entrepreneur, because I have to be willing to take a risk. And I like to help students do that. Because I really, there's one thing, like, think about writing. I love teaching writing. I'm passionate about it. We can follow the model, you know, we can meet the standard, and that's important. It's important to give kids exemplars and to show them what we expect and to help guide them towards our model. But the next piece is really beginning to trust that what we think, that's not in the lines of that model, that what we want to express and create in the world is valuable. That's power. That's really powerful. And when I can help students do that, and teachers do that, and teacher leaders do that, that's what gives me purpose in my work.
That's so profound. I think that's so profound and at the heart of why every single child should be able to engage at grade level in writing, because I really feel like what you're talking about, giving students voice, even though, yes, there's structure, and in Texas we have 26 lines, they need to get it into 26 lines to meet this standard. That's almost a genre of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the way we write in the real world. And the reason for giving students voice, what I love is when I read that, where you said that you said things and she scribed for you because you were so young. So she was scribing your words, but it was you're the author. It's your voice, it's your words. And so I work with older students who are gaining literacy. There's nothing wrong with them. They just maybe haven't had an opportunity to gain literacy in the target language, or maybe at all. But that is exactly why those students, every child, can engage in the writing process. Someone writes that down for you, and then boom, you're in it. You can start to revise. You can work with a peer. You can change things around. You can engage in every part of it. And like you said, what that gives to the writer, to the person, their voice, I just can't imagine that our work would be could be any more meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Helping people do that. I bet you get so much joy out of bridging the standards to what we really are meant to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the other piece is really the reading comprehension. And I do very much believe in text dependent questions and having students really analyze a text at a high level and have opinions about a text and justify their thinking with text evidence and all those very rigorous academic standards. I see the real value from a life perspective experience. The kids can read and understand, what's this author's perspective? What's their bias? What language choices do they make, and how do those choices affect their communication? Because that's going to serve them as writers too. So I get great joy in my EL Excellence Institute when I'm training teachers and engaging teachers in ways of engaging students in analyzing text closely and writing with evidence in ways that don't feel, it's fun. It doesn't feel like school.
Right.
People are so excited about who we're reading about or the text, because that's part of it. You need an engaging text. But taking a hard academic text that has interest to it, people are sneaking a little Google search because they want to learn more about this person, and that's good.
Isn't
right?
that it? Then that's the gold. Then you have everyone, because they're, like Stephen Krashen says, it's compelling. And some text might not look compelling, but how's it presented? And how did you build up to using that text and giving people access to that text could make it compelling? Like you said, they're like on their phone on the side going, well, let me find out more about this. I agree. I think that's fabulous. Tell us more about that institute. How do you offer services? So I would imagine that a district could hire you to come and work with a group of teachers, but how are these institutes played out?
That's a very exciting question to ask right now, because the way that it usually works is a district, a county, a state department. They hire me to come in and I do the institute. So I'm doing that all over the place. I have also and will be doing more of bringing my institute around the country. So I'm currently planning for 2019 to host an institute in several places around the US. So stay tuned,
Okay.
follow my blog and get more insights on that. But then what that does is it gives people an opportunity where, say, maybe your district can't have a consultant come in and work with all the teachers or whatnot, but 5 of you want to go. You want to get the training, right? Or you want to send a team. So I'm really looking at how to best leverage the tools that I'm creating and the resources that I have for teachers to really find a practical solution to reaching every child, to scale that so that every teacher can be effective with ELs. Because I think what's important, I mean, a lot of us, if we put EL in the title, it draws all of us who have ELL expertise and who have EL in our job title. And that's important. We have an important role. We all need to know how to scale our work, though, because if we just have the luxury of working with a few students, my question is always, what's the rest of the day look like for your students?
Yeah.
If English learners are getting pull-out services or they're only getting a support for one period, what does the rest of the day look like? I'm interested in helping those teachers who don't self-identify as EL teachers, but who equally want to reach every child.
Of course.
Right? To feel the agency that, hey, I can help English learners. I don't need to just think, oh, that's okay. They have their EL period or their EL support. And now for the rest of the day, I'm just going to hope that support's really strong. Instead, I work with teachers where they go, oh, I get it. I get what language has to do with this task, with this text. I get how I can engage my English learners and help create a sense of belonging for students who may be different than me.
Absolutely. I was a child in high school that struggled terribly with reading, and I avoided it. So writing was as bad or worse because I was just not doing it. And I got off level as a younger child. And so avoiding reading does not make you a better reader. So I'm sitting in a room where I just don't feel that there's anything there for me. School was something to get through or not even to get through. I gave up more than once on the whole school thing. So it speaks to me quite a bit that you talk about, how can we support teachers? Because they're so busy, and I get it. They don't need one more thing. They can't, there's no room for one more thing.
Mm-mm.
So I'm inspired by your work because I think we're like-minded in how do you support teachers where this is a different lens that you're going to look through, whether that kid stays in your class or not, because it's just going to make your pedagogy like amp it up.
Well, and that's why working with core teachers, it has to be practical and relevant to teachers. It just has to. Teaching is too hard. You can't have one more thing. And the problem is when people get removed from the classroom, and as one of those people, I work very hard just to not get removed from the classroom,
Right.
to get the classrooms to stay current with teachers. But if you get too removed, what can happen is you break everything down into all these complex frameworks, and then you want teachers to do the work of synthesizing your framework into their reality. What I do, I help synthesize, okay, I get your reality. You need to teach these rigorous standards. You need to actively engage a lot of kids who are at a lot of different levels and a lot of different interests and different social, emotional learning, etc. So in your reality, let me help you. And one of the most important shifts really is to shift the discourse of the classroom. How do you shift, right? From initiate, response, evaluate, which is I ask a question, students answer, and I say good job, which, trust me, I still do. I'm totally aware of it, and I'm leading the change, and my awareness has me very humble of like, wow, this is a default. To shift from that to really open-ended conversations where students have back and forth multiple exchanges. So there's two shifts simultaneously. There's a shift from hand raising to using think, pair, share in small groups. And there's a shift from asking questions that have one answer. Or even if it's an open-ended question, having a classroom culture where you kind of know you're supposed to do it this way. To creating a culture in the classroom where we really value different voices. We really value different interpretations of this text, and we're going to listen to how you justify your thinking. We're going to hold you to actually a very rigorous standard to justify your thinking, but we're going to create a space for different perspectives.
I'm with you 1000%. Just an hour ago, though, I was on the phone with somebody. I know how I would answer this, but I'd love to hear your take. It was a secondary teacher who told me that, and also a consultant trying to help the secondary teachers who their position, I hear this a lot, is that if we don't lecture, the old model of sage on the stage, stand and deliver instruction for 45 minutes where kids try to absorb 45 minutes of note taking. That we're preparing them for college when we do that. Okay. And so that I've heard that more than once, that if we don't do that, then they're not going to be prepared. How do you respond to that? Because I'm with you, of course, and people who follow me know I'm with you.
Let's take that goal. Okay, so you want a student to be able to sit in an academic lecture in college with really high-level concepts going on. So what are the tools you're going to teach them to be successful? A lot of secondary schools use Cornell Notes, which is a great idea. And you can build students' capacity to take good Cornell notes. But as part of that pedagogy, even the simple act of, I'm not going to talk for more than 8 minutes without you doing something. So what if I'm lecturing and you're taking notes? I stop. Take a process moment.
You have to.
Jot something down. What was the most important thing that you want to take away from the last 8 minutes of me talking? Talk to your partner. What was it?
Because you know what I remember, because this is right in alignment with what you're saying, and this is how I respond usually, is what I remember is when I went into college, I had a tape recorder and I had to record that person because there was no way that I could process the whole lecture. And then I would come home, and I had a very difficult time because once I decided to go to the junior college, I hadn't built a lot of these skills. So I had to kind of teach myself how to chunk the information, stop the tape recorder, process, write something down like you're saying. And so it was very difficult for me because I wasn't attending when I was in school. So what I hear you saying is exactly that we are preparing them. We're helping them internalize the thought process and the thinking the way they're going to need to do it, even if they have to sit for an hour.
Well, and the thing is, you don't want to do one more thing as a teacher. You want the academic conversation to serve your goals.
Yes.
Right? So if you're trying to get someone to understand the impacts of a certain moment in history, yeah, you might lecture on something and have students take notes and use the conversation to talk about what they think is most important or whether they agree or disagree. But then hopefully you're also having them read something that relates to that. And they're looking again at that same essential question. What are the impacts of this, right? And they're analyzing, what does this author think about it? And what's my interpretation? And talking about that text, hopefully, is not the teacher doing all the interpretation and the students listening. I mean, hopefully interpreting a text is students doing the hard work of interpreting a text, because they need to, that's going to be college. You're going to be sitting there with that text by yourself, and you better make some meaning from it.
I know. This is why these things are important for every classroom, because how are you getting a formative assessment of what they think? And if you're not allowing them to produce language somehow, talking to each other, writing something down, reading it themselves, I agree completely.
It's a check for understanding, and it's an ebb and flow. It's not a perfect thing. That's the other thing that it's, I think, sets me apart from some consultants or from some leadership approaches in the field, right? I really value humble learning and the fact that mistakes are magic, and we need to, as teachers, take risks. We need to say, okay, this text is probably a little hard for my students, but it's what they need to be reading. How can I chunk it so we get into it and let them wrestle with the complexity, let them try to make some meaning and talk to each other? How can I create a safe place for them to take risks, which means I'm taking a risk, because they might just look at it and go, I don't get it. They might not have a conversation, right?
There's another part you just made me remember from your book that it just kind of blew my mind when you said, the I do, we do, you do model is not always going to serve you best. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because a lot of people are like, wait, what?
Yeah. So I love I do, we do, you do. I mean, that is explicit, direct instruction. And so what happens is if I try something and everyone is just going, I don't get it. Well, guess what? I'm going to explicitly model, guide them through it, and then set them free with the gradual release method. Like, that is going to be a mentorship apprentice approach to teaching. But if that is all I do every single day, they don't get to experience productive struggle. I don't get to assess them. Are they learning? And what can be problematic, especially when it becomes like a scripted program that's very much I do, we do, you do every single day, or we say, oh, you have English learners, therefore do this all the time. I've met a lot of English learners, especially in secondary, starting around 8th grade, who've been in the district and U.S. schools since kindergarten and are still relying on a sentence frame, on a paragraph frame to even begin to articulate an idea. That's a problem. And I've had, it's really through the peer observation inquiry that my first book is about, where I was leading teams and we're collaborating to try to meet a goal, and we're watching students. One theme that came up with many different teams I worked with in this one district was, wow, kids are very reliant on the scaffolds. And it's one thing to say in this moment they seem reliant, and I go, oh, of course, well, they need it. Let me help them. But when you see that in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, you got to realize this is not the students. There's something wrong with our systemic approach. So what I really encourage all teachers to do is do that ebb and flow between give them a chunk of something they can engage in that is a little bit of a challenge, where you're not 100% certain they're going to get it immediately, and watch how they engage, have them in conversation or a annotation and writing, whatever the piece of what you're teaching is, and then gather formative data from that to decide, do I need to teach the entire class I do, we do, you do, or do I need to pull a small group, or do I need to give feedback? The other piece that's really big about that is just for language use. When you just let kids go without a sentence frame, you really notice what language assets they have. So let's say I want someone to explain something cause and effect. I could put up my frames, this because this, since, blah, 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 this. Like I can have all the since, so, then, because frames up there and have them go. And if they're, 2nd year speaking English, I really might let me model this and let me guide you, and here you go. But in most classrooms where you have long-term English language learners, students with at the intermediate level, as we used to call it, expanding level, depending on what terminology you use, but students have some of that language. So why don't I just get them talking about it, right? Like in a 2nd grade classroom, I dumped over a bunch of pens and just said, what happened? And so they all frantically told the story of what just happened. Meanwhile, I'm listening. Oh, this student's using words and phrases. This student's using and then to connect ideas. But a few students are using cause and effect language. So then what I do is I have those students share, and I end up creating a sentence frame out of their language.
Nice.
So it's a good way to actually differentiate. I'm now
Absolutely
validating the high expressions of language that are in the classroom. I'm showing the students, I listen to your language. I care about your language. So then they want to be part of it. So our sentence frames always come from the class, and then I do the +1 after I see what I don't say, hey, come up with a sentence frame. I get them talking about something meaningful, but I listen for their language, and I will create some frames that are useful out of what I hear them say.
That's fantastic. That's such a lot of people hear the word differentiation and they get nervous about how much work that's going to be. But you've just explained how you can differentiate for students who have more language, stretch them, honor them, and also support your students who need that language all in one way of questioning and bringing that language to making it visible from them. So I think that's fantastic. We were going to, I know you have to go soon. We both have to go soon, but I wanted to ask you, but I think you've given us so many already. If you had something that you would suggest that teachers start doing maybe tomorrow, something practical that they could start doing, is there anything else that you would want to leave the listeners with or people that are watching?
Well, one thing I was just because we're talking about differentiation, I'm thinking of page 101 of my book in the support section, where I talk about how do we differentiate with ease? Because you are right. I think differentiation, a lot of us, myself included, kind of break out into cold sweat, right? Yes. Differentiation is something where somebody else wants me to do something and I'm not really 100% sure what it is they want me to do. And it's sort of an imperfect goal. So I'm just going to fail at it, right? Like that's kind of how it's set up in education, which isn't fair. So I write about differentiation for the real world. I'm looking for the exact page. I think it's about how to choose the right supports. Here we go. Oh, wait, hold on. So expect, engage, observe. I mean, it's what I just talked you through, but it's a concept that I talk about more on page 95, and I demo my trainings as well. But start with high expectations, which is really what the grade level goal is.
Mm-hmm.
Engage students and observe. And I'll connect that to my recommendation that you really structure peer conversations. So start small and just take what is a question that you ask the class. Notice, how about this? Notice anytime you ask students anything and you want any kind of verbal response. Just notice. What are the questions you're asking? Maybe you could just jot them down. Notice when you call on individuals and when you say turn to a partner, or when you say I want you to talk in a small group, or when you really structure a bigger group discussion. But start to notice your discourse defaults, because notice your defaults is going to help you then pick one really high leverage piece for you where you're going to add a peer conversation. So if I'm a teacher who lectures and I've got a lot of history to cover, let's say, and I'm lecturing is my style, then a good start would be I'm going to chunk. I'm going to have a little timer going. After 8 to 10 minutes, I'm going to stop and have students think, write, reflect on their notes, and then pair discuss. Partnering is the easiest discussion. If you're not used to a lot of academic conversations, partnering gets everybody engaged. Give them a specific task. What is one of the most important things from your notes that you wrote down? Why? Or they can go much more in depth if you're trying to really focus on quality Cornell notes, right? Looking at like what is one high level question to ask, but choose something related to your goal and just give them a partner conversation. If you teach kindergarten, right, and think I can't do partner share, it's chaos. You can start with that turn, knee to knee, the actual physical movement of turning and talking when you're at the carpet. And same thing, think with this read aloud, what is one meaty question that will get some discussion going? Right?
I like that. I like that baby step where everybody, no matter what your style is, that's a great entry point, that we could just chunk what we're already doing and give students an opportunity to process and produce some language, which has them thinking, of course.
Exactly. And don't give a sentence frame, and listen and notice what happens. That's your expect, engage. If some students don't participate at all, that's where you need to lean in and try to understand why, right? So with younger students and definitely emerging ELs, you're going to have more, okay, if I provide a sentence frame and model it and repeat it and guide you into this, then I will get participation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for some students, that's not why they're not participating, right? It may be the wrong partner for them, right? So there's trial and error where you realize, okay, here's a partner that's not very supportive, or they feel embarrassed about this partner. Let's move seating around a little bit and until we get what we want.
I think that's fantastic. I think for me, it's a different way to look at how just to take a little bit more of a risk, even, than what I normally do. And so I feel like this is a great place for everybody to start, no matter what you're doing. That's a good place for us to notice what we're doing. So thank you for that. I know we're up on time, but I'm hoping you can give us make sure to say your website and your Twitter handle, and where we can get more Tonya Ward Singer in our lives.
All right. So TonyaSinger.com is my website, and my name is spelled with an O. So you might see it and say Tonya, but it's spelled TonyaSinger, Singer.com. I also have tonyasinger.com/EL excellence. And on that page, you will find a lot of downloads. You can download the 6 essentials for EL excellence, some good tools, a one-page quick reference to differentiate supports that complements what's in the book, but it gives you it all in one little page. Mm-hmm. So go there, sign up for my blog. I don't write a lot in the blog, so I'm not going to spam you like some of these email lists that I'm on that I get emails every day. You will hear from me, though, when I have a new course offering or an institute coming to your area and opportunities to connect online or in person.
And great blogs too. Like Ton Nguyen just made a fantastic infographic of one of your blog posts that was purely for putting out information for people. And so that's one of the reasons I really wanted you on the show, because we're really big at who is sharing content for teachers who can't get to any kind of professional development. I think just subscribing to your blog and following you on Twitter is a PD in itself. And
absolutely, absolutely. The blog is all about getting out free content to educators in the field.
So I really want to thank you for that. I'm personally just very appreciative to have you in my network. And I know I speak for a lot of people out there when we say thank you for everything that you're doing. Where can people see you soon? Are you going to be at any of the conferences coming up? Do you have anything on the books for next year?
I am going to be in Bakersfield, and I have to look at my calendar exactly. It's a Thursday and a Friday in December. I'm doing a teaching institute down there that is definitely open to the public. And I am, 13th and 14th. I'm going to be in Virginia for the Department of Education on the 16th of January, working with EL leaders from all over the states and educators. My other work that's all coming up is within districts, so it's not open to the public. But I will have institutes. There's going to be one in Indiana in June that is also open to the public, and I will have more coming soon.
Okay, fantastic. We'll make sure. I'm going to ask you for links to those, and I'll put them in today's show notes. You can always, for anyone listening to the show or watching us, you can always find the links in the show notes at the bit.ly/BA podcast. And that's all capital letters, BA podcast. And you're looking for episode 40, and it'll say Tonya Singer as my guest. So thank you again. It's been a delight to speak with you, and I just appreciate everything you're doing. I hope to get to see you soon.
Thank you so much for creating this podcast and for helping get ideas out among educators. I really appreciate, and I'm honored to be here as your guest.
Yay. Thank you too. Okay, we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.